And we're live. Hey,
Yeah.
everyone.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
And I guess let me introduce myself. I'm Michael from Jobin.cloud, actually a co-host here, helping out and Shally to kind of highlight questions or help answer anything as essentially a co-host to help assist Shally in the presentation. Without any further ado, let me pass over the
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it.
microphone.
That way, I won't miss any questions. So we learned that sometimes questions kind of get passed by me if I'm in the middle of making an illustration or something. So if you have any questions, you put them in the Q&A, and Michael will be able to float them to me, so we won't miss them, hopefully.
Yeah,
And
sounds good.
yeah, if you send a chat or send a question, either way.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll go
let's go
in
ahead and
the
get
wing,
started.
so I'll head over. I'll leave it to you, Shally.
That's right.
I'll still be there, so I'll help out in answering questions, or if needed, I'll join in. Yeah.
Great, 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 great. Thank you. All right, folks. So we are basically second episode into the new Shally's Edge series, which is just something that I'm doing with Jobin.cloud. They're helping do. They sponsor by providing, for example, the software that I use in order to do some of this work. So I am essentially able to use it as a part of the relationship. But it's completely free. You can actually sign up for Jobin directly through the link on the advisor page, or if you already have a membership, great. There's no cost to it. There are some premium features that you can upgrade for, like enrichment and things like that. But I'm not trying to convince you to buy any expensive software here. They are kind enough to help me set things up and provide the platform for a webinar and everything. So thanks to them for helping out with that. On the last time, we talked a little bit about the networking playbook, and one of the most important parts of the networking playbook is really doing outreach. It's important to start building your network if you don't have one, or if, like me, you sort of dropped out of the face of the earth for a little while and it ended up resurfacing, and you have to sort of rekindle your network. It's really, really important to do outreach, and everybody thinks that cold outreach is just really bad, but it isn't. It doesn't have to be bad. It's bad if we make it bad. It's bad because um, it fails because it feels like spam. And so here we're going to fix that. We're going to fix cold outreach, make sure that it sucks less, and we're going to out recruit the robots, if you will, and make things not feel like spam, so that you can use cold outreach in a much more integrative way that'll get you results. I do want to clarify, cold outreach doesn't necessarily mean cold calling, although that is part of it. And really, it's technically not cold outreach. It's kind of lukewarm outreach, because you are sending a message and you're following up. So it's not like somebody's never heard from you before. They may just not have been paying attention, or maybe they read the message and archived it or whatever. So it's really not as cold as we make it seem. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we go. Great. All right, I think that should be working. There it is. As I mentioned before, please ask questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat or in the little question mark box over there. We're going to move a little bit fast. And what I plan to do today is cover about 30 minutes of content, and then just go into an Ask Me Anything kind of, Q&A session, which I think might be a little bit more useful for some folks than just a bunch of canned material, because I can drill down and show you some examples of how I've been implementing this. Like I mentioned before, this is all about cold outreach, but cold outreach is really not as cold as we fear it to be. The problem is that how we do it right now, cold outreach is broken. 80% of the messages that I get on LinkedIn and email feel just really robotic, especially the ones that are like the second and third follow up. They're like, hey, just following up to see if you got my message. And then again, hey, just wanted to see if you got my message. And then some kind of funny comment. Now, those things are funny. I do save some of those. They're funny and they make me laugh, but they don't necessarily make me respond. So it doesn't really work, does it? Because the whole idea here is to get engagement, whether you're doing this for business development as a solopreneur like me, or you're doing this to reach out to candidates as a solo recruiter, also like me. So candidates are really overloaded. They're skeptical. Sometimes they question things like, is this email real? Is it legit? Where is it coming from? I don't recognize the email address and things like that. So we want to warm things up a little bit. You really don't get a second chance. It's not like you can send them another first impression later on if you kind of blew it the first time around. I wanted to bust one of the biggest myths, and that is that engagement isn't necessarily personalization. Personalization is, well, actually, let me back up. Real engagement, when you get someone that is actually going to respond and engage, there's really three components that need to come into play at the same time. Relevance, is this relevant for them? And timing, is this relevant for them right now? And tone. Tone is one of those really hard to pinpoint things that when you're sending, for example, text messages, tone can be very different to the person receiving it than the intention that you have when you send it. And it takes two people to really appreciate tone. So I always like to run my messages past someone else and just kind of let them, I test them out, if you will, on my unsuspecting friends / victims, and say, hey, how does this sound? Does this sound like, is the tone coming across as positive, or, and sometimes my messages that seem like to me they're going to be funny as a follow-up end up being not really that funny. In fact, they just kind of backfire. So I always check with other people and before I start a campaign, and try to get some various opinions, if you will, on tone specifically for that. Relevance, you have absolute control over. Relevance has to do with, are you reaching the right people? So if you're doing correct segmentation by job title and company and keywords, and you're combining all of that, you're not just using one of those, like company name only or job title only or keyword only, but you're combining those, your segmentation will be highly relevant. Timing is a little bit less easy control. You can send messages to people when you see that they posted online. Then you know that your timing is good because they're online. But that means you have to go around lurking everywhere and making sure that you post when they're online. When we're sequencing things like what we want to talk about here today, it's a little bit more difficult to nail the timing. So you have to kind of take a shot at it. And that's why we have multiple steps in the sequence, because the timing might not be relevant this week, but it might be relevant a week later, a month later, and so on. And some of my sequences may be 30 days, 60 day, 90 day out, so that I continue to revisit, because the first time I reach out, maybe they thought, oh, that's a good idea. Too bad I don't need it right now. And then 90 days later, I come back and they go, oh, this is what I was thinking about. Perfect. And now the timing is correct. So it's got a lot to do with that. How do we automate without sounding like a robot? Automation and smart automation. It doesn't mean smart blasting or mass blasting, where you just send in the same email, generic email to everybody, only just replacing the first name and maybe company name. That's still basically mass email. It's not really personalized. So we have to learn to automate differently. And that's where tools like Jobin.cloud, for example, and you might be familiar with Clay or Lemlist, Apollo, some others out there. I'm, of course, using Jobin.cloud, and I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like, because I'm able to generate personalized content in those messages for each individual separate message. So they all look different to the recipient, and they're all relevant to them, personalized to them, by using some ChatGPT type of generative logic, by using prompts, basically. So you want to stagger your sends, you want to rotate your openings, and you want to alternate your tones, because you don't know, first of all, the timing. That's staggering your sends. You might have, great timing today, or maybe not. So, reach back out in 30 days, 90 days, and then the timing might be different. Rotate your openings is where the relevance of that content is going to come in. So take a couple of different shots at that relevance. And I'm going to give you a tip at the end of today also that'll help you with subject lines that are highly relevant. And we'll talk about that. And then, of course, alternating your tones to, maybe the first tone didn't quite hit and it just kind of like, pass right by them, but change it up a little bit. And that other tone gets them to engage and respond. Sometimes I use humor. Sometimes I use more kind of like bullet points, if you will, like just hit really hard on a couple of points. It varies depending on, I think, the audience, whether they're highly technical, whether they're people that are hip with internet culture, where I might be able to share a meme or something like that. It kind of depends. And so I'll try a couple of different ways. I'll try the bullet points and I'll try the funny, so that I see which one hits harder, which one gets me the responses. But I want you to keep in mind one thing. Automation is kind of like seasoning when you're cooking. If you don't have enough of it, things are really bland. So if your messages don't have a lot of automation, they don't have enough automation, they just kind of go right by them. It's bland, it's uninteresting. You're not going to get engagement. On the other side of that, if they're too automated, then it's like over seasoning. Now you have something that's maybe not even edible because it's too salty or too spicy or too whatever. And now it's just as unappetizing because you overdid it. So you want to hit that spot kind of in the middle. Here's a little catch-all kind of multi-channel logic that you can use as a fallback logic until you develop your own sort of sequencing. And I'll show you an example of this. You send them a LinkedIn message, a DM, if you will, on LinkedIn, whether that's a message or through a group or whatever, and no response. Okay, then wait a few days and send them an email if you have that. If not, then maybe try something else, like maybe a text message. And if you've been ghosted twice or 3 times, then make a reminder for yourself to follow up with a phone call, assuming you have a phone number for them. So again, this depends on the information that you have, but you can see that it's a multi-channel logic. I'm using LinkedIn, I'm using messages, I'm using texting, I'm using phone. Switching around like that is really important because it short circuits, it overrides the center of our brain, our if you will, the fight or flight predator response part of our brain, where we recognize patterns and we are actually breaking the pattern. The pattern is, if somebody's going to spam you, they send you a spam message, another spam message, another spam message. If they're going to cold call you, like I'm sure you get plenty of those cold calls in the middle of the night, or 7, 8, 9 o'clock where you're eating dinner or whatever, and it's annoying, right? But those are always cold calls. Where we interrupt that sequence, where we go outside of that sort of lizard brain response, is when we jump universes from text to email to voicemail to LinkedIn. That carries the message that this is a real business communication. It isn't telemarketing. It isn't spam, because spammers don't call and telemarketers don't spam. And so the fact that you're combining channels is secretly, subconsciously communicating that this is a much more legit message than your typical canned spam that you get. So learn to kind of apply that logic in whatever information you have. If you don't have a phone number, then just do email and Facebook and LinkedIn or whatever. So let's talk a little bit about how we generate some AI prompts that are that don't sound like they came right out of ChatGPT. It really does have pretty much everything to do with the way you package your prompt. And sometimes I can over-engineer. I've done this. Mike on the call here recently corrected one of my over-engineered prompts that just was so specific that basically it just kept repeating the same thing over and over again, and it wasn't personalizing. And of course, that failed too. So you can over-engineer, but you want to basically deliver a prompt to the automation, to the ChatGPT or whatever tool you're using, that has these 3 basic principles. The context. So what is this about? Recruiter talking to a candidate. This is the context. I'm a recruiter and I'm reaching out to a candidate. It's a passive candidate. It's an active candidate. Give it the context. Say this is the second message. This is the third message, whatever. Just give it that context. The second part is the role and tone. So, for example, you are a witty recruiter with an opening that's funny, or you are a warm and approachable recruiter, or you're an executive recruiter, or you're formal and whatever. So that role is really important, because the customization, even though you might think, oh, this is only going to be like 3 or 4 words in a sentence, it still matters, because we want to make these as imperceptible as possible. We want these personalizations to be part of our message, not a variable that gets injected into the message like we used to do in the old days, where it's pretty obvious, dear name, I saw you work at company as a job title. That doesn't really come across as personalized. And then you also want to make sure that you explain the type of output, or essentially the format, right? So you got the context, the role or tone, and then the output. This could be a text message. This could be a DM. This could be an email. How to change things up for that versus a text message versus a Facebook post, and so on. So those are the three components, if you will, that you want to use when you're programming these. And when you use the criteria that you personalize with, this is a little bit different than the prompt structure. So the prompt structure is how you're going to frame the question. But then the variables that you want to use within the personalization, here's a really good example. Some kind of shared context, something that you have in common between the two of you. So you can actually train your GPT to know who you are and use part of your background or something from your background that matches the person that you're sending it to. So it knows that perhaps you are, like me, a science fiction fan. You like, as a Asimov, and you're a scuba diver, and you're originally from Latin America. And so it knows that when it's reach out to somebody, that one of the things it can do to personalize is find a correlation between that. Perhaps they're a scuba diver, or they posted about scuba diving. Perhaps they are also Hispanic, etc. So it'll find some kind of connection between the two. That's one really good component. It's not the only one, but it's a really good one. Then you want to have some kind of icebreaker that's relevant. The icebreaker is sort of like either a greeting or right after the greeting that makes this connection between the context and why you're reaching out to them. So great, we both like science fiction books. So what? That doesn't mean anything. But hey, we both like science fiction books. Wondering if you would be interested in this opportunity with, this tech startup or whatever, right? So that's the connection between those two. And then finally, you need to have at the closing of the message, usually the last thing before your signature, and this is another thing that the prompt can also help you customize, you need to have a call to action that is human. So that sign off, if you will, can't just be here, click here, or it could be, for example, I use let's schedule time on our calendars. I have a link. Here's my link. What's your link? You can use my link. You can put some time on my calendar, or send me your link and I'll put some time on your calendar, something like that. Drop me a note or give me a call. Here's my number, or something like that. And it depends obviously on the context, but you can have something that feels human and also connects to information on their profile. So you put those three variables together and have a nice prompt, and you'll have a much higher response rate. See, there's a question. Do you have more success with hyper-relevant messages, or is the message still relevant but friendly, relatable, better at getting a response? So hyper-relevant tends to have kind of the uncanny valley opposite effect. If it's too personalized or too relevant, there is such a thing. It does tend to kind of make people wonder how exactly that happened. And so I tried to personalize it without going too far, and I find that there's a sweet spot there. And I know I can't really just tell you exactly what that is, because it depends on your tone and your position. For example, I have a large network on LinkedIn, so I can point to my LinkedIn network with something like, check out my network if there's anybody I can help you connect with. But that may not necessarily work for everybody else. Oh, the voice to text. This actually is PowerPoint right now, but believe it or not, I've got ChatGPT. I just started paying for I shouldn't say I've been paying for the subscription for about a year, and I'm pretty impressed every time they come out with new features. The most recent one, now they enabled the camera. So it used to be you could talk to it, and the ChatGPT voice to text, also text to voice, the other side as well, has been pretty good. I know there's better ones out there, but since I'm already paying for ChatGPT, I just kind of stay in that. But now they added video, which is pretty cool. And that's part of the base. There's been a couple of new releases to it lately. So I'm using that. But in the case of the PowerPoint, this actually is just PowerPoint built in here. Okay, so let me show you, kind of walk you through. Well, actually, first let me actually go to the next slide, and then I'll come back and show you an example of both, so I don't have to go back and forth. So the next slide is about next slide, workflow. So this is the actual workflow, kind of putting it all together. And the reason I wanted to show you this is I'm going to start when I go into my workflow. I wanted to show you the workflow, and then I think it's a little bit out of order, and then show you kind of like the prompts. So with my workflow, I use AI tools to extract information from LinkedIn, from email. I sometimes upload CSV files, and I enrich that information with the tool that usually provides some way to get extra information. It could be company name, job title, location, things that I may not already have. Sometimes when I upload a CSV, I have a couple of pieces of information, but it might be outdated. In other words, I might have had their email address from before, a year ago, and I kind of want to find out what their current job is. And so these tools are good at enriching that and then allowing you to segment based on that. So you can use the tool to extract the information and auto enrich, and you can also use these tools to break down your list into segments. You can do it through filters inside of the tool, or conditions, which is what I have up here. You'll see the condition. So the condition is this person first degree, then go this route. Is this person second degree, then go that route. For example, if they're a first degree, you can send them a message on LinkedIn. That's a DM. But if they're second degree, you can't unless they're in a group. So if you can't send a message, then there's a condition that says, okay, then send an InMail if you have InMail. If not, then send an invitation to connect. And after a while, if they don't accept, then withdraw that invitation. So these are the conditions. And the actions are the messages, or the invitation, or the withdrawal of the invitation. So with the tagging and segmenting, you can use these conditions to have multiple avenues for one group of people. For candidates, for example, you have candidates that you might be first degree, candidates where you might not have their LinkedIn, and so you have to send them an email instead of an InMail. You might send them an email that invites them to connect with you on LinkedIn, and then if they connect, then you have another set of sequences, right? The second step are the actions. So what are the steps that the robot is going to take? Which includes the prompt in it. And then you have the trackers. These are tags or lists or folders or some other way to identify what happened after these actions were taken. If they replied, they go in the response bucket. If they didn't reply, they go in the try again later bucket. If they didn't accept your connection request, then they go in the didn't accept my connection request bucket. And that way you can further segment your lists later on. And then, of course, you have the body of the message. And finally, you have the reply route. What happens on the response? If they respond, where does that go? For example, they can reply and go into another sequence. If you have a separate sequence for active candidates, if you will, or if they reply, they go into another list. For example, they might reply with, I'm not interested now, but let's keep in touch. You might have a route where it goes into the let's keep in touch sequence that is a long-term ongoing sequence. That way you don't have to remember to send them a message every 30 or 90 or whatever days, because it's already built into your sequence, which you keep going. So now I can show you what I was talking about. And I think I need to stop this and start it up again, because I have to do screen, entire screen. There we go. Okay, so what I'm about to show you here, this is Jobin. And this part of it is free. The pieces that you would upgrade, pay for, would be, for example, enriching with emails. So you would use their solution to add email addresses for those people that you don't have email addresses for. But if you get connected to them, the email address will be extracted. So that's for free. And what you have here is, this is an example of a sequence workflow. I'm trying to show you kind of the whole picture here. It might be a little small on your screen, but let me back up and show you what this looks like. So right now I have 9 different sequences running. So these are different tracks or workflows for various purposes. 4 of them are related to this webinar series, and I'm using them to get people to come to the webinar. And so those 4 are separate channels or actions based on segmenting the audience in a way that I can't do from within the same sequence. For example, I have 2 LinkedIn profiles. So this one goes to my, let's just call it profile number 1, and this one goes to my profile number 2, because within a sequence, it can only send to one profile. It doesn't have the ability to like log out of this one and log into the other one and then log out of that one and log into this one. So I've got 2 separate ones. And that's why it's separated that way. And then I have another one for people that I only have email addresses for, where I do not have their LinkedIn information. But I wanted to show you kind of the whole connection builder, which is this one here. And this is a sequence to help me add to my network. So this workflow starts out by identifying the first condition. Are they a first degree? If they are already a first degree contact, then I may have accidentally added them to the workflow, or I may have added a bunch of people to the workflow and I didn't realize some of them were already first degree. So to prevent myself from my own mistakes, I knock them out if they're already a first degree, because this is about building my first degree connections. So therefore, job's already done there. And what it does is it adds a tag and then it ends the sequence if they are first degree. If they are not, then the next condition I check is, are we already talking? So I've got some tags that I use in other sequences to identify someone with whom I've been having a conversation. That way, I don't accidentally add someone to a new sequence who I'm already talking to or engaging with in conversation from a previous sequence. So that eliminates them. If they're already in some other sequence or they've already been engaged, then again, it drops off. But if they're not first degree and they're not in discussion, then I start my LinkedIn connection request. Send out a connection request, which you have a choice of, with Jobin, you have a choice of 2. You could either send a generic let's connect request without customized messages, or you can customize the message and add a note. But you get fewer of those. So you are limited, depending on your contract, if you have a premium or not, you are limited to the number of connection requests you can send with personalization. I just don't, because I have this follow-up and I feel like that's good enough, given that I have like kind of a way out for this if it doesn't work. But you may choose to actually personalize that message. You can use the same prompt engineering that we're going to talk about here for that as well. So here, if they accept, so this is the, hey, let's connect, and it waits some time. And then if they accept, then I tag them as someone who accepted my connection. I also tag them as first degree, so I don't accidentally include them. I wait a little bit after they accept. So about 15 minutes, this is a variable that you can choose. And then I send a message as a follow-up that basically says, thank you for connecting. And in this case, this message, I do not have any ChatGPT prompts to personalize, because it's literally just 15 minutes later, it's a direct from me to them, and it just says, thanks for connecting, here's my information, if you need me for anything, whatever. It's kind of essentially a courtesy to connect. But I am then capturing their information and adding them to a list so I can follow up later. A couple of days later, then I send a follow-up message, and this one has my personalization in it. If you're wondering what that is, these are prompts that you can manage within the tool. So I'll show you here. I can manage the prompts here, and they're variables that you insert into your message. You can actually have various variables. You can put 3 or whatever, however many AI generated pieces of content into your message. And in fact, you can even rewrite the whole message afterwards. You can have 3 GPT prompted pieces of content and then have GPT prompt re-engineer that message to make sure that there's nothing weird or unusual about it. That's a little bit more kind of like meta, if you will, like prompts inside of prompts. And I'll show you that. But for now, I just want to show you what this looks like. You have templates that you can save, and then you have to specify where this is going. Is it email, message, email, etc.? Here are the prompts. And this one here is the connection builder second follow-up, because guess what? This is my second follow-up after somebody has accepted my connection. So here's the list of prompts. This is the template for where you can build the prompt. Remember the 3 components that we talked about. But I actually already have some built in here. I have a bunch of them that I'll show you. So here's the one that I'm in this case. And yes, I can make this available, but it's very personalized. So I'm not sure if you're really going to want to use it. Really just kind of get the idea from it. Here you see I'm saying, pretend that you're Shally and you recently accepted, or this person recently accepted your connection. And 2 days ago, you sent this message. So you're now following up. And it says, write a follow-up LinkedIn message. And then it uses my voice. This is like my own, how I describe my voice. I tell it what to include, what not to include, what to avoid, the tone to use. And I also say, don't use a subject line. Even though it's LinkedIn, it should know that. It should know that it's a LinkedIn message. It should know not to use a subject line. It's always better to assume that it doesn't and tell it not to, because it's not going to hurt you to actually specifically say, don't use a subject line. And then here are my variables that I'm feeding to the prompt and saying, when you're customizing this follow-up, use the following information. Use their name, their job description, their industry, their career level, their career path, and look at the top 5 skills, and finally, read their summary. Now, that's a lot, but keep in mind, I am not customizing a message with all of that information. I'm telling ChatGPT to look at that information to find something that is in common for us to be able to connect. So it's using a variety of options. If you only give it one option, then it can't customize as much. So you give it a variety of options to allow it to discover something that might be in common, because it already knows who I am, and it's going to find that connection between the two of us. There's a few other things you can do here. For example, you can limit the number of words that you get. So it could be 20, really short, or you can even specify, use a sentence of no more than 14 words directly in the prompt. But you can control that here as well. And if you didn't address the tone or style in the prompt, which I did, you can choose one here. You can also have it generate a list of 3. So this would be like, for example, benefits or options or something like that. And you can even get really, really, really advanced and change the frequency and presence and temperature of the model that you use. I would not recommend you start out with this, but after a while, you start learning that you want to kind of change things up a little bit, make them more or less flexible, so you can do that. Once that's been generated, then you want to test it. You go into a contact and just start sending a message, use the prompt, and see how it works. I've already done that, so I know that this works well as a follow-up message, so I'm just going to go ahead and close it, and that's what this is. But I still have my own message here in addition to that as a PS. I've always done PSs. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it seems to work. So that's it. That's the second message that they get. Wait some time, and if they haven't replied, then they ghosted me. But if they replied, then they go into the conversation and so on. On the other side here, if they never accepted the connection request after a certain period of time, which is established here, so 30 days later, if they have not accepted the request, then I try to get their email and phone number. This is a paid feature, which is now acquiring, the contact information using credits for your account. And if it does have an email, then I can send them an email. If it does not have an email, then I basically withdraw the invitation. And this is something that I haven't seen anybody else be able to really do this fluidly, is I can invite people and then I can uninvite them. That way I don't have a bunch of outstanding invitations out there. By the way, as a side note, it's a really good way to clean up your LinkedIn. If you go in there once in a while, a couple times a year or so, and just withdraw invitations or actually disconnect from people, Jobin can let you automate that, which is pretty cool. Again, no charge. So here I tried to get their email, didn't find it. Okay, I withdraw the invitation. But if I try to get their email and I get it, then I send them an email message. And this email message has some GenAI stuff in it, not very much. It's very, very specific as a let's try to connect kind of thing. It just has a little bit of variability. Then I wait 30 days, and if they still don't reply, they didn't accept my message, connection request, and they also didn't accept my email or didn't reply to my email, then I withdraw the invitation and end the sequence. So that's my connection builder, designed to engage with new people that I am not first degree with. The other sequences that I have here are, for example, one that's strictly for email that has a much more straightforward path, condition, tag, send email, and it has some customization in it, but not a whole lot, because it's particularly just marketing this webinar, for example. So that's a very specific laser focused sequence. And I have others, for example, building my first degree network here where I'm using my contacts. So you can do things like, for example, build your network. And then once you have new contacts, 90 days later, send them another follow-up message to keep them warm. Or you can have an automation that sends messages to people that you haven't talked to or contacted in 6 months just to check in, right? Like a little check in. I've got one of those sequences as well. It's literally called catch up. That goes out to, I add people there that I haven't talked to in a while and just sort of warms them up. So those are the sequences and the variables and the prompts. Happy to, we went a little bit over the 30 minutes, but that's okay. Happy to take any questions now about what we talked about. Any of this stuff, any of the, how do we do it? Let me go back to the webinar, stopping sharing, and there we go. Okay. Chat. Oh, yes, the prompts. Okay, so there's a question to preview. So I can't preview from within the sequence because it's already set up and like it's actually running, but I can actually go back and show you what some of those prompts look like directly by looking up a contact, for example. So let me grab a few here and I'll come back. Oop, I need to share my screen again, don't I? Yes, I do. Here we go. Screen. And here we go. Okay. So I just went back to I left the sequences here and I went back to my contacts and just pulled up a list of contacts from a filter here. And so we can try a couple of these. And so to show you a prompt, and this is how you test it as well, is you just start to send a message here. Doesn't really matter whether you're using email or in-mail, whatever, because you're just testing it out. And you load the AI generated prompt here. So we'll load that connection builder second follow-up that I showed you, and then hit show preview, and it'll show you what it would be writing. Stephen, your passion for empowering seasoned leaders and refining careers is truly inspiring. Your expertise in vendor management, hiring, employer branding, this is all from their profile. With my experience in this industry, I hope we can collaborate. Let's work together. Now, keep in mind, this is a very specific LinkedIn connection builder. So I'm trying to get someone to accept my connection request through this follow-up, if you will. So it's very specific. Let's try another one. I'm not actually going to send it, so let's try another one here. Let's do the webinar icebreaker for when I'm inviting people to this webinar. Once again, show preview. And this is a one line. So this is one line that gets added to a paragraph that already exists. So this is the personalization line that's directly connecting them to the webinar. That's pretty basic. You can have multiple of these. You can have one line for this, and you can have another line for, location. And that's why I wanted to give you a really hot tip, if you will, a pro tip, or an edge case, if you will, that you can actually use right away with whatever tools you are using. And that is in the subject line, you can use the variables of that person's field of study and their current role to come up with a subject line that is engaging and specific to them instead of just having their name. Because, Shally, the name just by itself, anybody can do that. But this is a little bit edge, a little bit extra. So you would build that through, actually, I think I can do it right here. No, let me just start from new here. Okay. And I'm going to send a message, and then I'm going to actually create a new one. And this is the blank slate for the new prompt, which we'll call it school subject, school role subject. Make sure you name these something that you'll remember. You're the only one that's ever going to see this anyway. Here. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use one of the fields from them from their profile. This is their profile, which is I'm looking for specifically the field of study. Oh, I think it might be major education. Nope. It's in here somewhere. Mike, what's it called? The education field, the I'll find it. Darn it. Well, I don't want to waste all y'all's time. I'm digging through here blindly trying to find the education field. So I'm just going to use maybe their role description. So there's a couple of things you can pick out. You can actually pick out their title, which is just the job title. But to give it a little bit more context than just the job title, you can also use what's in their headline, or you can use the description from their most recent job posting, which is role description here. So here we'll say create a personalized subject line that includes, and then we'll do their, that includes first names, job, or includes components of their job description, and to create a warm greeting or something like that. I don't know. I'm totally experimenting with this right now because I was trying to do the education one. Let's see what happens. And here you can see you can specify, if you don't want to include all that in the prompt itself, you can specify if it's formal, friendly, casual, etc. I'm going to go for formal. I don't want more than 20 words. We'll just see here what we can get. Save and apply. Now, for this to be a subject line, of course, we're going to have to use it in an email message because it's not an email message. Oh, come on. There we go. It's not a LinkedIn doesn't have a subject line. Sorry. So here you can add that. Hello, something, something, something. Okay, let's try it. Meet Joshua. Okay, needs a little bit of tweaking. So this is why I do some testing with it. Obviously, it's congratulating them. I'm not exactly sure how that ended up, but I would tweak it a little bit and eventually get to the point where it's actually using, that you can even suggest words to include in the subject line as well. So hopefully that answers your question. So you've got the prompts in the body that works for email, and this one, the experimental one I was talking about as an edge case here for the subject line. Good question. Any other questions? Can you repeat? Does Jobin put me in? Does Jobin put me in? Hopefully, no, you don't go to jail. No, actually, so Jobin is basically acting as a human. The way they do it is everything that they do is the same as what you would do if you were doing it. So they don't do any. They don't have the volume of activity that would get you in trouble because you're behaving the same way you would be behaving. So it's kind of like a self-driving car, right? It's not going to speed. It's not going to run red lights. It's going to follow the rules and go about its business and make sure that it's well behaved. So no, it doesn't land you in LinkedIn jail. I will warn you though, I have landed myself in LinkedIn jail, but that wasn't Jobin that did that. That was actually me that did that with Jobin, because I went ahead and turned off one of the safeties that said, go ahead and exceed the number of connection requests. And I did. And of course, within a day, I got locked out for 24 hours. But that was entirely on me because I literally just said, go faster than you're. I basically told the self-driving car to go speeding, which, yeah, shame on me. But no, it doesn't. It should not. It would not, as long as you follow the protocols. And what it's doing is it's sending messages through the same interface that you would be using to send messages. It's not doing anything that's API driven behind the scenes that's violating their server terms of use. It also isn't modifying anything on the page. That's one of the big things that they don't like, is when apps on LinkedIn modify what the page looks like. So someone's profile is being edited by the app. That's something they really don't like. They definitely come down hard on that. So no jail time for you. Any other questions? If you're wondering kind of what changed before and after, so I was working on basically a manual. Before I started doing this, I was doing a manual LinkedIn campaign where I was basically just ChatGPT, copy paste, ChatGPT, copy paste. So I was using the personalization, but it was basically one at a time. And it was too slow. So because it's a lot slower when you have to paste the prompt and then come back and paste the message and then go back and grab the new profile, paste the prompt, come back and paste. It's so much, and it's so repetitive. It's really mind numbing. So when I started automating this, I was able to do, reach my goal of 50 connections a day, 50 requests a day, a lot faster, where it would have, taken me a good chunk of time to just do that manually. Now I just have it on autopilot, and it's constantly every day doing 50 connections, again, requests. And as far as responses, when I add the logic from the ChatGPT prompt to an email for candidates, particularly, I've seen my response rate on the first message jump by about 20%, and then some, like even more than that. So if I was getting 30%, I'm getting 50. If I was getting 8%, I'm getting 28%. I mean, it's a huge response difference, and that's because what changed was the messaging logic, the triggers, the cadence, the warm up sequences, right? So I might send a request to connect and follow up with an email and so on. So that intersection of the different mediums. Unfortunately, there's no way to text from within, but you can create, basically a step in the process where it reaches that step, and then you go and text those people and move them to the next step yourself manually if you want to do that. So the series, Shally's Edge series, we have determined is to keep things really easy, going to be the fourth Tuesday of every month. So book that time, 1 p.m. US Eastern, fourth Tuesday of the month. So the next one will be on May 27th. And I'm going to be talking about managing sourcing overload, from candidate chaos to hiring clarity. So basically information overload kind of tools and techniques to help you declutter your electronic realm, whether it's doing business outreach or candidate outreach, either way. How often, I see another question here, how often are you reaching out to cold candidates? So, Kristen, cold is like, I want to say really never cold. Like I've sent them a message or either on a message and an email, or an email and a message. So it's really not cold exactly, because it's on LinkedIn, right? It used to be a lot colder. I mean, an email out of nowhere where the person didn't even know where you got their information. But nowadays they know that I found them on LinkedIn. So it's not as cold. However, I know what you're saying. Yes, Brenda, it is recorded. So how frequently or how often am I reaching out to them? Every single campaign that I do has a cold outreach sequence for candidates, every single one of them. So I do it every time. And I have, I don't know if this was the question, I have a minimum of 5 steps in the sequence. So there are 5 things that I do with candidates. Now, I didn't show you a candidate sequence here. This is a marketing sequence. So it stops at the, did they respond, follow up, at that point, because it's basically, I'm just trying to connect with them and build my network. But with candidates, there are 5. So if they don't respond to the first one, it switches to another sequence. If they don't respond, wait some time, come back. So I'll do, in-mail, connection request, email, and so on, like that. So up to 5. The difference is that I'm always adding a little bit of additional information to each message. So it's not the same message 5 times. It's the first message has an opener and it connects, uses the prompt to connect. And then the second one is a follow-up build on the first one. Hey, I just realized I should have told you, and here's a little bit more information. And then again, the next one has a little bit more. And when I cross realms, I reference the other one. So, hey, I'm emailing you because I haven't heard back from you on LinkedIn, and I thought maybe you abandoned your profile or you don't use LinkedIn anymore, like lots of folks. So, ping me back. By the way, here's my LinkedIn URL if you want to connect that way. So, like, I'm letting them know that I'm crossing the realms. That way, it is warming it up. So, I hope that answered your question. At least 5 within a candidate outreach sequence, and every time I use these sequencing, it's just I found it's a lot more. 2 things: I get much better response, and also I don't forget things. I don't forget steps, which is actually what was happening before. Is I was manually doing a lot of personalization and would just forget where was I with this person, and then I would have to go back and see if they responded and all that. So this is just so much easier. All right, everybody. Hopefully we will see you here again next week for the information overload portion of Shally's Alley. So buckle up and we'll see you back here in 4 weeks-ish. Take care, everybody.